Hey guys, welcome back to The Readers. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is an entitled people story. The first time the police showed up to accuse me of robbing my own home, I was annoyed. The second time, I was frustrated. By the fifth time, I had a plan, a lawyer, and a security system that would make Fort Knox jealous. This is the story of how my entitled former homeowner learned that while she may have lost the house, her actions were about to cost her a whole lot more. I should probably start from the beginning. I'm a freelance sound engineer in my early 30s, and after years of saving every penny, I finally had enough for a down payment on my first house. The property I found was perfect for my needs. A modest suburban home with a detached garage that had been converted into a professional-grade recording studio. The previous owner's ex-husband had been a musician and had spent a fortune soundproofing it and installing top-tier equipment that was included in the sale. The house was a foreclosure, which explained the great price, but I didn't think much about the circumstances until the final walkthrough. That's when I met her. The former owner, who I'll call OP's nemesis for this story. She was supposed to have vacated the property already, but when I arrived with my realtor, we found her standing in the empty studio space, running her hands along the acoustic panels on the walls. My realtor seemed uncomfortable and asked if she needed more time to gather her belongings. She turned to us with this strange look in her eyes and said something about how the acoustics in the room were very delicate, and it would be a shame if someone who didn't appreciate it just ruined everything. She made a few more passive-aggressive comments about amateurs not understanding the space before finally leaving. I got an uneasy feeling, but I figured it was just someone having trouble letting go of their old home. I was wrong. Exactly 1 week after moving in, I was setting up my audio equipment in the studio. It was a Saturday afternoon, and I had the garage door open to let in some fresh air while I worked. I was carefully positioning my mixing console when I heard car doors slamming outside. 2 police officers appeared at the garage entrance, hands resting on their duty belts. The older officer asked if I lived there, and when I confirmed that I did, he informed me they were responding to a call about a burglary in progress. I was completely confused until he mentioned that the caller had reported seeing someone breaking into her house and stealing expensive equipment from the garage. I quickly realized what was happening. I showed them my driver's license with the address and pulled up the property deed on my phone. The officers were professional about it and apologized for the confusion. As they were leaving, the younger cop mentioned that the caller had been very insistent and seemed to know specific details about the property. That's when I looked down the street and saw her, standing on the porch of a small rental house 2 blocks away, watching everything unfold with what I can only describe as a smug expression. After the police left, I decided to handle this like an adult. I walked down to her house and knocked on the door. When she answered, I introduced myself as the new owner and tried to be diplomatic. I told her I understood this situation must be difficult, but she couldn't call the police every time she saw me on my own property. That's when she completely lost it. She started screaming about how the studio was still morally hers because of all the sweat and soul her ex-husband had put into it. She called me a vulture who had preyed on her misfortune and accused me of planning to destroy everything her family had built. The conversation ended with her shouting that the studio was a landmark and she was just protecting it from me. She slammed the door in my face after promising I'd be hearing from her again. I should have seen the pattern coming, but I was still naive enough to think that one conversation might have gotten through to her. Over the next 2 weeks, I learned exactly how wrong I was. The second incident happened when I was testing my studio speakers. I was playing some reference tracks at a completely reasonable volume during the middle of the day, well within local noise ordinances. About 20 minutes into my session, the police showed up again. This time it was a noise complaint. The caller had apparently claimed that the booming from my garage was rattling windows throughout the neighborhood. The officer who responded was clearly skeptical. He stood outside the studio and could barely hear anything even when I turned the volume up. He apologized and mentioned that the department was getting tired of responding to calls from this particular address. Before leaving, he suggested I might want to consider documenting these incidents. 3 days later, I was doing some minor renovations in the studio. Nothing major, just restaining the wooden floors to match my aesthetic preferences. I had the garage door open for ventilation and was using a standard wood stain I'd bought at the hardware store. I was about halfway through the project when I heard sirens approaching. This time it wasn't just police. A fire truck pulled up, followed by what looked like a hazmat response vehicle. The fire captain approached and informed me they were responding to reports of illegal dumping of hazardous materials and dangerous chemical odors. I showed them the can of wood stain and explained what I was doing. The captain looked at the perfectly normal household product, shook his head, and muttered something about people wasting emergency resources. As they were leaving, the captain mentioned that whoever was making these calls was going to face serious consequences if it continued. He said false emergency reports were taken very seriously, especially when they involved mobilizing multiple response units. But she wasn't done. The incident that really pushed me over the edge happened about a week later. I had a client coming in to record a demo, a local musician who needed some tracks mixed for an upcoming audition. It was a perfectly legitimate business transaction, and I had checked with the city to make sure my home studio was properly licensed for commercial use. About an hour into the session, police showed up again. This time, the complaint was that I was running an unlicensed commercial business out of a residential property. The officer who responded was less patient than the previous ones. He told me that while he believed I was operating legally, the repeated calls were forcing the city's zoning department to take notice. He warned that they might open an official investigation just to cover themselves, which could create a huge headache for me, even though I wasn't doing anything wrong. That night, I realized I needed to stop playing defense and go on the offensive. As a sound engineer, I'm used to solving complex problems by breaking them down into manageable components. I decided to treat the situation the same way. First, I invested in a comprehensive security system. I'm talking about professional-grade cameras covering every angle of my property, with high-definition video and crystal-clear audio recording. I made sure to have prominent signs posted stating that the property was under 24/7 surveillance. I also installed one of those video doorbells that would capture anyone approaching the house. Next, I contacted a lawyer who specialized in harassment cases. She reviewed everything that had happened and was genuinely excited about the potential case we could build. She immediately drafted a cease and desist letter, which we sent to the former owner via certified mail. The letter demanded that she stop all forms of contact and harassment and warned of legal consequences if the behavior continued. My lawyer also explained something interesting about false police reports. In our state, making a report that alleges specific, imminent, and life-threatening danger carries much heavier penalties than general nuisance calls. She suggested that if the harassment continued, we might be able to set up a situation that would give us ironclad evidence of malicious false reporting. We didn't have to wait long. About a week after she received the cease and desist letter, I noticed her walking past my house more frequently. She would slow down and stare at the studio, sometimes taking pictures with her phone. She was clearly planning something. That's when my lawyer and I came up with what I now think of as our masterpiece. We knew she was watching the house obsessively, and we decided to give her something to watch. My lawyer confirmed that what we were planning was completely legal. Essentially, we were going to stage a theatrical performance on my own property to see how she would react. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. I had a friend who did voice work for local commercials, and we arranged for him to come over on a Saturday morning. Inside the completely soundproof studio, we staged what sounded like a heated argument. My friend shouted things about safety concerns and electrical problems, while I used my synthesizer to create some dramatic sound effects, electrical zapping noises, and a loud thump. The key element was a small fog machine I had bought for a Halloween party. These things produce completely harmless water vapor, but they look dramatic. We set it up near a ventilation fan that faced the street, and at the climax of our little performance, we sent a small puff of white smoke drifting out of the studio. From inside the soundproof garage, no one outside could hear anything we were doing, but someone watching from down the street would see what appeared to be smoke coming from the building where they had just heard shouting about electrical problems. The response was even more dramatic than we had hoped. Within minutes of the smoke appearing, I could hear sirens approaching. Not just one police car this time. We're talking about 2 patrol cars, a fire engine, and an ambulance. They arrived with lights blazing and sirens wailing, clearly expecting a major emergency. I calmly walked out of my house to meet the fire captain as he jumped down from the truck. I told him there was no fire and that he was responding to a malicious false report from someone down the street. He looked confused, so I invited him and the police sergeant inside to explain. My lawyer was already there, having arrived through the back door during our little performance. She had prepared a comprehensive folder of evidence, including a detailed log of every police call, copies of the ignored cease and desist letter, and a tablet queued up with video footage from our security system. We showed them the crystal clear video of my friend and me setting up the fog machine, the footage of the harmless smoke puff, and most importantly, the audio recording from our security camera of her frantic 911 call. She had claimed there was an explosion, that she had seen a fireball, and that someone might be seriously injured. Every word was captured in high-definition audio. The final piece of evidence was the live feed from inside the studio, showing my friend and me sitting calmly with our coffee, surrounded by perfectly intact equipment and no signs of any emergency whatsoever. The fire captain and police sergeant were furious. The captain explained that mobilizing this kind of emergency response based on false information was not just illegal, it was dangerous. While they were responding to our fake emergency, real emergencies might be going unaddressed. The police sergeant added that filing false reports was a serious criminal offense, especially when it involved multiple emergency services. They marched down the street to her rental house with our evidence folder in hand. I watched from my porch as they knocked on her door and had what appeared to be a very intense conversation. Within 30 minutes, they were walking her to a patrol car in handcuffs. She was charged with filing false police reports and misuse of the 911 system. Given the scale of the emergency response she had triggered with her fabricated story, these were serious felony charges. The district attorney's office decided to make an example of her case, particularly because she had a documented pattern of false reports. The criminal case moved surprisingly quickly. With our video evidence and the recorded 911 call, her public defender advised her to accept a plea deal. She was found guilty and received a hefty fine, a suspended jail sentence, and mandatory psychological counseling. The judge made specific comments about the importance of not wasting emergency resources and the potential consequences of her actions. While the criminal case was proceeding, my lawyer filed for a permanent restraining order. Given the documented harassment and the criminal conviction, it was granted without any opposition. She was legally prohibited from coming within 500 feet of me or my property. We also filed a civil lawsuit for harassment and intentional infliction of emotional distress. The documentation we had gathered made this an easy win. I was awarded damages that covered all my legal fees, the cost of the security system, and compensation for the work hours I had lost dealing with constant police visits and disruptions to my business. But the real justice came later. The criminal conviction and civil judgment created a serious financial burden for her. Between the fines, legal fees, and damages she owed me, she couldn't afford the rent on her little house down the street. I heard through neighborhood gossip that she had been evicted and was moving back in with relatives in another state. A few months after everything was settled, I was in my studio mixing a track for a new client. The money from the lawsuit had allowed me to buy a vintage piece of audio equipment I had always wanted. And my business was thriving now that I could work without constant interruptions. I looked out the window and saw a moving truck parked in front of her old rental house. The new tenants seemed like a nice young couple with a small child. As I watched them unloading boxes, I thought about how different things might have been if she had just accepted that the house wasn't hers anymore and moved on with her life. Instead, her obsession and sense of entitlement had cost her thousands of dollars, resulted in a criminal record, and ultimately forced her to leave the neighborhood entirely. Meanwhile, I was enjoying my dream home and my dream studio with legal protections in place to ensure my peace and quiet. I turned back to my mixing board and put on my headphones. The track I was working on was coming together beautifully, and I had several more projects lined up for the coming weeks. The sweet sound of success was even better than I had imagined. The lesson here is simple but important. When someone tries to make your life miserable through harassment and false accusations, sometimes the best response is to give them exactly what they're asking for, just not in the way they expected. She wanted drama and emergency responses. I gave her both, along with the legal consequences that came with them. Now I have my house, my studio, and my peace of mind. She has a criminal record and a very expensive lesson about the importance of accepting reality and moving on. I'd say that's a fair trade. Update, 6 months later. Well, I promised an update if there were any new developments, and boy do I have some stories to share. Turns out my former neighbor's saga was far from over when she left town. About 3 months after she moved away, I got a call from my lawyer. Apparently, she had hired an attorney in her new state and was attempting to sue me for entrapment and intentional infliction of emotional distress. Her lawyer claimed that my fog machine stunt was an elaborate scheme to frame an innocent woman who was just concerned about safety in her old neighborhood. My lawyer was actually laughing when she called to tell me about it. She said the lawsuit was so poorly constructed that it basically amounted to admitting guilt to all the charges she had already been convicted of. The best part was that her new lawyer had apparently not been told about the criminal conviction or the restraining order when he filed the paperwork. We responded by filing a motion to dismiss based on the previous criminal conviction and restraining order, along with a counter motion for frivolous litigation. We also pointed out that attempting to sue me violated the restraining order since legal contact was specifically prohibited unless it went through the court system in our state. Her lawsuit was dismissed within 2 weeks, and the judge in her new state was not happy about having his courtroom used for what he called vindictive harassment disguised as litigation. Her lawyer withdrew from the case immediately after learning about the criminal background he hadn't been told about. But that's not even the best part. Remember how I mentioned she was living with relatives after being evicted? Well, it turns out her pattern of behavior didn't stop just because she changed locations. About a month ago, I got a call from a detective in her new state. Apparently, she had been arrested again for filing false police reports. This time, she had called the cops on her own relatives, claiming they were holding her against her will and had stolen her property. When police arrived, they found her in the middle of a screaming match with her elderly aunt over household chores. The detective had done some research and found her previous criminal record from our case. He wanted to know if I would be willing to provide a statement about her history of false reporting for their case. I was happy to help, and my lawyer provided them with copies of all our documentation. It gets better, though. During their investigation, they discovered she had been calling police on various neighbors in her new area, making complaints about noise, property disputes, and suspicious activity. She had racked up 7 different false report incidents in just 4 months. The prosecutor in her new state used our case as evidence of a clear pattern of behavior. She ended up being sentenced to actual jail time this time, 6 months, along with mandatory psychiatric evaluation and treatment. The judge specifically mentioned that her previous conviction showed she hadn't learned from her mistakes and needed more serious intervention. My favorite detail from all this is what happened to her during the psychiatric evaluation. According to the detective who called me, she spent most of her sessions talking about her recording studio and how I had stolen it from her. She apparently drew detailed floor plans from memory and described elaborate fantasies about getting it back someday. The psychiatrist's report recommended long-term therapy for what he described as delusional attachment disorder and obsessive vindictive behavior. The court ordered 2 years of mandatory counseling as part of her sentence. Meanwhile, my life has been absolutely fantastic. My business has grown tremendously, word spread in the local music community about my studio setup, and I'm now booked solid 3 months in advance. I've worked with some really talented artists, and several of the tracks I've mixed have been picked up by record labels. I used some of the money from the civil settlement to upgrade my equipment even further. I now have a vintage mixing console that used to belong to a famous recording studio, and the sound quality is incredible. Ironically, the studio is probably worth twice what it was when she lost the house, thanks to all the improvements I've made. The best part is the peace and quiet. I can work without constantly looking over my shoulder or worrying about police showing up. My new neighbors are wonderful. The couple who moved into her old rental have become good friends, and they actually book studio time with me occasionally for their own musical projects. I've also become something of a local expert on dealing with harassment and false police reports. The police department actually asked me to speak at a community meeting about documenting incidents and knowing your rights. Several other people in town have reached out for advice when dealing with similar situations. Looking back, I'm almost grateful for everything that happened. Yes, it was stressful and expensive at the time, but it taught me valuable lessons about standing up for myself and not letting entitled people walk all over me. It also led to some amazing opportunities and connections I never would have made otherwise. The detective from her new state told me something interesting during our last conversation. He said that in his experience, people like her don't usually change their behavior until they face serious consequences. He thinks the jail time and mandatory therapy might actually help her, though he admitted it could take years. As for me, I'm just enjoying my life and my work. Every time I sit down at my mixing console, I'm reminded of how much I love what I do and how lucky I am to have found the perfect space to do it in. The studio sounds better than ever, my clients are happy, and I sleep peacefully every night knowing that justice was served. I've kept all the security cameras active, though these days they mostly just capture footage of delivery drivers and the occasional curious cat. It's nice to have that peace of mind, but I honestly don't expect any more trouble. The whole experience taught me that sometimes standing up to bullies requires patience, documentation, and a willingness to play the long game. But when you do it right, the results are incredibly satisfying. I hope her new therapy helps her find some peace and move on with her life. As for me, I've definitely moved on with mine, and it's better than I ever imagined it could be. Final score. OP wins completely. Entitled Former Owner learns that actions have consequences and everyone else lives happily ever after. Sometimes the good guys really do win. The next one is a pro-revenge story. This happened a few years ago when I was serving overseas with the US military. The location I was at was in a poorer area. There's a fair number of panhandlers, a lot of petty crime, and just people doing stupid crap. Well, one racket that goes on in this area, and apparently in other areas of the country too, is the local cops incentivize reporting vehicles with out-of-date inspection stickers. Apparently, they give these people access to the inspection database if they think the sticker is fake or stolen, which actually does happen. If you drive a motorcycle, one of the things they tell you when you in process is to keep the sticker in your wallet and not on the vehicle, or else it'll just get peeled off. Anyway, what these people will do if they find a car with an out-of-date sticker, or if they run the plates and find it's out of date, they will jimmy the door open, steal every single thing out of the car, and leave a note that they've taken it to the police station. The idea is that you show up at the police station to get your stuff, and they force you to pay the fine for an overdue sticker and then give you a deadline for an inspection, or else you'll get another fine. Well, I came out to my car one morning, and lo and behold, there was a note on my seat saying that all my stuff was at the local police station because my inspection sticker was fake and I had to go get it. No, not only am I late for work, my kid is also going to be late for school because there's no bus, and I have to drive her every morning on my way. Also, my inspection sticker is not out of date, so I have no idea what's going on. Now, here's the thing that was extremely problematic, was I had put my passport and my wife, kids in the glove box because I was taking them to the base to get some paperwork done, as well as grab some paperwork for my wife to apply for a new passport because hers was expired. I'm very forgetful, so I put them in the night before and made sure the car was locked. Yeah, dumb mistake. Anyway, I get to the station, ask them what the heck was going on, and then when I have them look at the inspection documents that the guy had taken, which clearly stated the car had been inspected and was current, they apologized and told me that they would give my things back, and I had to wait there for a second. I asked to file a police report for theft, but they looked at me like I had 3 heads and told me nothing was stolen, even though somebody broke into my car and took my things. This is when a light bulb went off in my head, and this might fall into the unethical category. The guy had taken official U.S. passports, which might be a problem, but probably nothing would come of it since they were turned right into the police. However, I asked him where my wife's passport was. They told me that whatever is there is there. I said I needed a police report because I needed to contact the U.S. Embassy about a stolen passport and the fact that this police station would know exactly who the person was that stole it because they had dropped off my things that morning. I have never seen someone's attitude change as quickly as that cop's attitude changed. He tried to talk me out of filing a police report, but I was pretty insistent, so I went ahead with the police report, and then I did contact the embassy and reported the passport stolen and gave them all the information of the police station, and when I got the police report, I emailed it to them as well. Wound up getting a free passport out of it for my trouble. The embassy told me they were going to handle it, and from what I heard, the person who broke into my car actually got arrested and fined and was looking at additional charges because he stole foreign documents. Really would have liked to have been a fly on the wall when one of the local cops rolled into wherever he was at and told him to come with them. I don't feel bad at all. Hopefully dude learned his lesson and I did not have any further issues until I PCSD home. The next one is a malicious compliance story. Worked in a pretty low-key chill office of about 5. Mostly younger women with younger children. That's kind of relevant. I asked if they would drop mail at the post office or make a bank deposit on the way to or from lunch. They always went out. Both were on the way to from lunch. I told them to take an extra 15 minutes or so as needed so to not have them rush their lunchtime. So new woman starts and her and another person come to me and tell me that under Fair Labor Act and various other rules requirements they are to be additionally compensated, get mileage for vehicle use and so forth. And rules are rules and they are there for a reason. Yeah, they probably were correct on that point. I removed the ask that they go to the bank and such. Now, some days later, one of the staff come to me to say they will be in about half hour late on such and such day as their kid has to be dropped for something. No problem, I tell her, but she might as well just come in at noon. Why, she asks? Well, rules are rules, and the policy manual, same one they quoted to me, states that if they are more than 15 minutes late, PTO must be taken. A second policy, same manual, requires PTO be taken in blocks of 4 hours. This was not a well-received announcement. Okay, some of you are already probably responding with this being a dick move on my part. I gotta point out that these folks often had kid stuff to do. School events, Dr. Apt, kids missing the bus, and so forth. They would need to come in late, leave early, and so forth. Usually an hour or two here and there. My attitude about this was always, do what you gotta do with your kiddos. Let someone know if you'll be gone and just make it up whenever. It was a complete honor system. Didn't write it down, didn't really pay much attention as they were adults, honest, knew what was expected of them, and I trusted them to do the right thing. Needless to say, that PTO thing was my making a point. They quickly decided they didn't need all those demands formally made, and we went back to them going to the post office and such when convenient for them and coming in late without penalty when needed. The next one is an entitled people story. I have another entitled Karen story that happened a few weeks back. This time, Karen imposed her will in the lobby instead of the pool. This was a different Karen than I demand the pool stay open Karen, but aren't they all the same? Of course, Karen got the win, and while doing so, set off a chain reaction of piss-poor behavior throughout the hotel. For context, here are a few important details about the hotel lobby quiet hours policy, 10 p.m., and the authority or lack of we have. I know from some of the pool comments many thought we handled the situation poorly, but respectfully, when you have 100 kids and drunk parents causing havoc throughout the hotel, lobby, gym, pool, parking lot, hallways, and management has no urgency to evict them, it's challenging. Here are the factors to consider, and then I'll start with the night. 1. We're a hotel that caters to travel teams. About 50% of revenue comes from these teams. Hotel is located within a mile of huge baseball-softball complex. 2. 3-step policy to evict. Very loose, especially dealing with team groups. 3. Police very hands-off, unless we are officially evicting someone. I don't blame them, by the way. 4. Management has a every situation is different mentality. The owner is all about the money, and pays attention to the TA reviews. I don't have an issue with this. I was told about all of this before getting hired and realize it's a business. No one is stopping me from quitting if I don't like it, so it's 10 p.m., officially quiet hours in all parts of the hotel. We don't shut all the lights in the lobby off, but we do where breakfast area, wire TV, people like to hang out. They can chill out in the front part of the lobby as long as we get no noise complaints. Karen walks into the front door with her hooligans. Full travel team with about 40 people, 3 cases of beer and bottles of liquor out the ass, and starts setting up shop in the closed-down breakfast area. Before I could say a word, she says, "Do you work here? And if you do put the lights and TV on..." I try to deflect and give her an option. "We have a large area outside with ample seating, and a fire pit," I say. "Unfortunately, this area is closed, but we have an area outside that would fit your needs. This is the breakfast area, and it's already cleaned for breakfast tomorrow. Plus, I see you have a large group, and if we get one noise complaint, we have to take steps to stop the noise." I knew what was coming before Karen said a word. She wanted to hang out there because her group was a softball travel team, and the Women's College World Series was on TV. I was right, and Karen wasn't going to budge an inch. I gave a response for the record, that's just hotel policy, but knew it was in vain. Of course, Karen heads to the FD and starts intimidating the young female. First words I hear out of Karen's mouth, "I don't care what security said. Our group pays good money to stay here. Turn on the lights and TV or I'm calling corporate." The FD and myself didn't even push back. Both of us knew management's position, let them stay until you get a few noise complaints. These travel teams know the game, and it would be near impossible to evict them all. I'm not even sure how that would play out, to be honest. So Karen got the win, and actually they were not that loud, but secondary consequences arose. Another group came in, fully drunk and liquor in hand, and they were loud and obnoxious with no self-awareness whatsoever. We can't kick them out of the lobby because Karen's group is there and allowed to stay. I tried to explain and give the option to take the party outside, but they were having none of it. At that point, all we could do was wait for the first noise complaint, and it came quickly. It's hard to target one group and not the other. The complaint obviously came about the newer group, but when we explained the policy, they said, "How can you prove it's us? There is another group a few feet away." They had a point, but now this was more than a noise issue. It was both groups enjoying making problems for the hotel. This was entertainment for them, sad to say. After another noise complaint, I walked over to the ringleader and said, "We can't continue getting these complaints. The next step is to call the police." He confidently put his feet on the table and said, "I'm not leaving, go ahead and call them." He called my bluff, and ultimately he was right. When the PD showed up, we explained the situation, but they said they couldn't do anything. Unless we were ready to evict them, they were leaving. The PD gave a half-assed warning and were actually joking with the obnoxious ringleader when they left. I could give more details about the conversation, but let's just say we expected this outcome. It's step 2. Call the police. But as you can see, the 3-step policy has flaws. After the PD left, we lost all credibility to enforce anything, and everyone in the hotel knew that. This was entertainment to these hooligans, and they just kept getting louder and more demeaning, knowing they won. They finally got tired and went to bed, thank God. Karen loved every second of the experience, and I actually heard her bragging to her group that she started this all. Another win for Karen, ladies and gentlemen. In conclusion, staff had a short meeting a few days later. Management even said we did nothing wrong, and these people spend a lot of money, so just try your best. They had to refund a few people who complained about the noise, but not much more came up about the night. I would appreciate any feedback, critical or not. I'm always open to suggestions on how to deal with Karens, and have actually used some ideas I get in the comments. Anyway,